It's always a good time.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thrilling semester of seminar. Everybody knows the drill. Silence your cell phones. Any announcements? Wow, fantastic. Okay, and I have the proverbial sign-up sheet, so we'll pass that around and you can autograph it. And we are very fortunate today to start off our seminar with a dynamic speaker. I know, I've heard his talk. It's very good. His name is Dr. Thanos Gentilis. He's in the Department of Experimental Statistics. And he got his PhD in theoretical math from the University of Florida. We want to hold that against him.
Do not announce that.
And he's been here at LSU since 2018. And he has 4 areas that he specializes in. Data analysis, data analytics, and applied statistics. And the other 2 are the ones that are most interesting to me. Topological data analytics and algebraic topology. So,
sorry,
I wrote them on the card, so I forgot it. So he's going to give us a seminar today, Statistics, a path that you might like to follow, and he likes to get interaction and feedback from the audience.
Absolutely.
So without further ado, I forgot to say one other thing. He's the proud daddy of a new baby.
I am, which means sleep deprivation. If I pass out halfway through, just wake me up. I'm probably going to start changing something. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you a little bit. In preparation for this talk, Ed and I had a lot of conversations, and I'm actually giving this talk for our graduate students first. I want to explain more or less what we do over there at the stats department, and also give you some hints on how you can improve your own research by taking advantage of whatever the stats department has to offer. But I'm also looking at some of your professors. And I want to just remind you that we're there, and we're willing to help. And perhaps you need to consult us before you have the graduate students do the work. It's easier to create something right than try to fix it afterwards. Okay? I'm not saying this happens in this department, but I'm also doing consulting. And a lot of that consulting, especially lately, has been patching up things and fixing data sets that, come on, how did you get that data set to begin with? So my job here is to basically entertain you a little bit, and then we can talk about stats and what you can do in the future. All right? So I was told I have 45 minutes to teach you stats. All right. Get your papers out. Have some notes. All right, first theorem. Here's the chapter 1.1. Let's talk about the law of log numbers. I don't see. No. This is not that kind of talk, all right? And the reason why I started off with this is because that's probably what you see in the 705 class, right? From the discussion that I had earlier on with some of you, you said, statistics is not very useful for me because I go over there and I'm greeted by this, but then I go to the lab and I do something else. And I use this Agricola package in R and does everything fantastically. And I never do ANOVA anymore. Yeah, I know. And I'm here to address that. I'm here to tell you that there's more, and we're there to help. But I get it. Most of you guys are greeted with this. That's what we do in class, because we have to cater to all the departments. We got to be as broad as possible. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is a funny story. So, we have a mathematician, an astronomer, and a physicist in a train in Ireland. And as they're going with the train, this is what they see. They see a black sheep running around. So the astronomer says, oh great, all sheep in Ireland are black. The physicist says, okay, you can't generalize as much as that. It's like, okay, what's the right one? The right one is the sheep in this field are black. The mathematician is like going nuts. Like, how can you generalize that much? Like, okay, what's the right thing to say? Actually, the right thing to say is this. In Ireland, one field, there's one flock, there's one sheep, which is black from one side. Technically, you just look at one side, knows what happens in the back, right? Why am I bringing this up? Besides being like one of those non-nerdy math jokes. The reason I'm bringing this up is the idea of inference. So in 705, I started with a discussion of this, not a specific joke, but the idea of inference. And that's something that's tied to your scientific work. You're basically going in your lab, poking holes on leaves, doing your little thing, and then you say, aha, this implies that this result is for everything. Okay? You just did an experiment on 10 different things, and you're just now bringing it back to the world and saying, this is how things work. Inference. There is a bound to how much you can extend. Not all sheep in Ireland are black. This is not a good statement. Also, not this statement is very accurate. This is not very helpful either. The truth is somewhere in between. Statistics is the science that helps you first decide how much you can generalize. Okay? Where is the point? Does this apply to these types of trees? Does this apply to all types of trees? Does this apply to these types of trees in Ireland? So on and so forth. So we have techniques, and we discussed that in the beginning. How much you can infer, and generally, how powerful the test that you design is. All right? And that's something that you don't learn by doing computations. That's something that you learn by basically looking at examples and looking at how strong the statistical tool was behind it. So, inference, big topic. What is inference? Again, think about when you're cooking, right? You're trying to figure out if the soup is salty. What do? Pick up a spoonful, you taste it, and that gives you an idea of the dish in whole. Now let me throw in some wrenches over there. What if you just drop the salt and you did not stir it, and you still bake the top? Well, the soup is salty, right? Or what if you pour the salt and you just let it until it went all the way down, and you bake the top? The soup is not salty enough. In both cases, you made the wrong inference because your sample was mild. So, when you take the spoonful of the soup to decide if it's tasty or not, what you did is an exploratory analysis. Think of all the research that you're doing. This exploratory analysis, every single one of them. But what you really put on the paper is the generalization. I looked at the test that I did in the lab, and I'm trying not to say something about the world. Okay? So, when you generalize, this process is called inference. And it only works if the spoonful is representative of the pot. And that word, representative, has actual meaning in statistics. There are various ways to test whether or not you did your sampling right. There are various ways to design the test in such a way so that it is done. And these are things that you might not learn in the 704. Right? You might not even learn them in the 7015. You may not even learn them in the experimental design because they are practically based tied to your field. But you will learn the language for it. You will be able to appreciate that these things have a meaning if you take the 705, the 7015, and the experimental design. And honestly, you need to do that because you could be stuck like the poor mathematician just looking at your own samples and not being able to see the big picture. You're not a scientist then. You're just basically a graduate student that finished this thing, got a paper, and done. Or you may be like the astronomer that sees everything as black, and then you're over generalizing and everybody doesn't take you seriously. To appreciate that and be able to quantify it and be able to do it right, you will need some statistical language. There's no other way to describe it, I'm sorry. It's not just science. It needs it. All right. A little word on scientific research. And here I'm generalizing. This is not just plant pathology, it's general, right? These are the 4 basic types of experiments that I see left and right. When you manage to do random assignment and random sampling, these are the best experiments. Random sampling means you somehow manage to push away all sorts of relevant information. And you still, when you did your treatment and your control, you did it in such a random way so that you really test whether or not your treatment effective is. If you did it like that, you're doing it right. This is the ideal experiment, and this can be generalized to whatever your target population is. Most studies, at least in science, are down here, where you are able to do a random assignment because somebody helped you design the experiment, but you could not really account for all other crazy effects on top of it. Your sample is not 100% representative of all the population of trees throughout the United States because of budget constraints or something like that. So in that case, which is most of the times, you can infer a bunch of stuff only about your sample. That's unfortunate. Here's another thing. If you know that, that's your goal, that's a paper. People accept that. Right? You do your study, you do your analysis, make sure that you do it right, and you get a paper. You're not ridiculed. And that paper will say, okay, now I have this concrete result in my lab with these 15 samples. Can I now get more money to go out there and get 500 samples, 1,000 samples, and go up here? Now, I don't want to see anything down here on the right, but I do see them in my consulting. I see people that show up over there and they have asked 10 of their colleagues one question of interest. And this doesn't happen, of course, in science, but I had a lot of people from humanities that came to me and said, all right, I got these answers from these questionnaires that I administered to the graduate students in my lab. Can I get this result? No. Because you didn't do random assignment. You did not make sure that the students that you get in the class match the general population, so on and so forth. I'm not sure how to translate that into your area, but because I know that you guys pay attention to creating your designs, but if not, you need to keep that in mind. Now, if you don't do random assignment, you just basically ask whoever, but you're doing random sampling. A lot of folks can do that, especially if you're doing big surveys. Then you can still do a couple of stuff. You can generalize to the general population, but you can't say that the target was predicted by the H1. Still, what I want you to keep from this slide is that you're probably down here. Okay? Simple research is down here. Hardcore science, nature stuff is up there. For now, get this right, and with the result of that, push for the other. Okay? Okay? Real science happens up here. Random assignment, random sampling, random treatments, everywhere. Taking the classes that I mentioned in the beginning helps you appreciate, first of all, the language. What does that even mean? What does random assignment, random sampling, and all that stuff mean? Okay? So even though we're not going to teach you the exact techniques immediately when you start, all this is not going to sound Greek to you. Pun intended. Okay. Now, experimental design. This is the stuff that you do here, right? How many of you have been into such a situation? Did you see rows and rows of pots, right? Yeah, that's a typical thing. You guys experiment, you have your treatments, you have your controls, you have all that stuff. Maybe you're using things in the lab. Thank you, Ed, for the picture. It's great. Or maybe you do things outside of the field. Experimental design is basically a whole field of statistics that helps you build this kind of thing in such a way so that when you collect the data at the end, you make sure that it was the treatment that adjusted the variable of interest, not something else. And I'll get to that in an example. So, experimental design is a very important aspect of your research. You can be getting close to your PhD defense. If you haven't done your experimental design correctly in the beginning, all your data could be off. The example that I gave to the graduate students earlier on, they had this specific disease. This is in genetics, actually. It's for human genetics. They had a specific disease, and they were treating it with a certain chemical, right? Trying to see this new drug would work. And they were keeping their samples in the fridge. After they finished with this experiment, they noticed that the control group, nothing was done on the control group, was more resistant to the virus than the one that was treated. Everybody was freaking out. Why on earth is this happening? People were thinking that maybe the pill, instead of being an inhibitor, it would actually help the virus grow. Nothing of the sort. It was the place that they were holding the petri dishes in the fridge. They were holding all the control on the top, closer to where the cooling part was, and all the other stuff on the bottom. So it was the freezing conditions of the top that kept the virus in check. If they had done their experimental design right, it wouldn't just be put the pots like that. It would be also make sure that when you keep samples in the fridge, you have a mixed design on the top and a mixed design on the bottom. When you do your analysis, don't start with the healthy and then finish with the unhealthy. One healthy, one unhealthy. One healthy, one healthy, one unhealthy, one unhealthy. Even the way that you do measurements may be affecting your problem. Graduate students get to be tired if they're doing this for 5 hours straight. If you started off with the healthy, your measurements are fantastic with the healthy, you're getting everything right, then you're tired. The unhealthy now slip out, but you're just like, that's probably right, put that down. So experimental design goes beyond just putting the right seeds and the right nematodes here. It's also like a whole culture on how do I do the processes? How do I pick my measurements? How do I store my data? How do I even communicate that data out? You have to be non-biased even in saying things like, I believe the healthy versus the unhealthy or this or that. You always start at random. All right. And this is something that needs to happen early. This is not something that we can fix at the end if you come to us. Here's my data, statistics, fix it. It's something that you need to start off early because it might even affect your experiment in total. It's very confusing. Even if I explain to you randomized experimental block design, you might still have problems with it. Heck, I even still have problems with it. Like what happens when you have 3 treatments, but you only have 2 trials, and some of the treatments were not repeated in the second trial. Okay, if you don't have it nicely as it's in the books, well, there are ways to figure that one out. So it's confusing, it needs to start early, and you need to start putting it in the back of your heads. Okay? Any sort of experiment needs to follow. The question I get left or right is, okay, I didn't do it, so what? Well, all right. Probably going to get a publication anyway, but it's going to be one less tier because it will show up. The referee is going to notice. If you have a statistician on board, he's going to notice. Patterns emerge. It's not something that you can hide easily. And it's something also that committee members love to ask as you're getting closer to your PhD defense. Sometimes they give you a heads up, some other times they wait until you actually defend and ask, okay, how did you do the experimental design, day 1? And they obviously find the error and they point that out. And I'm not saying you might jeopardize your PhD, but let's not get there, all right? But yes, you do really need it. You can skew results and get different scientific evidence if you don't do it right. Are you with me so far? Okay, so this is the only piece of stats that I'm going to put up there. This is the classic randomized complete block design. So watch this. Let's assume that we have one control group, control, just a fancy word for I did not do anything to this plant. And treatment 1, 2, 3. I chopped this leaf, I inoculated this stone thing, I removed something. Just 3 types of treatments. Think about it generally. So now you have 4 things that you're trying to compare. Which one worked better? And you also want to replicate it a couple of times. Mark my words, replication, 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 to get your papers. When you have 1 trial, everybody's like, okay, yeah. When we have two trials, we actually get results. 3 trials, everybody was like, yeah, that's something. So let's just say that we have 4 applications, 4 blocks, and we have 4 treatments. This is a very easy way to do it. So let's say you're figuring out how to put the pots. The basic rule is each block sees your treatments only once. As long as you follow that rule, you should be fine. And all the blocks here should be the same, whatever same is. Same height, same length of plot, same number of trees in there or plants or whatever. As long as you do something like that, you're okay. And obviously all experiments don't look like that, and you have different situations that you have to take care of based on your experiment. But that's a good thing to remember. If you are to do multiple repetitions of multiple treatments, try to get this kind of setup everywhere, right? In the lab when you put things, in the freezer when you keep things, heck, even in your lab space when you put them to measure things, keep them like that. Right? Who knows what happens? Good labels also help. Why you should be doing that? Basically, the last thing. Control variation based on other stuff. How close you are to the door, how close you are to the freezer, how close you are to the sunlight, how close you are to whatever. There are other things that might be affecting your experiment and you don't even know it. In order for you to somehow mute that, is to mix your treatments around. The first row, let's say, is the closest one to the door. It's the first one that gets fresh air every time you open it. Make sure that you have one of each treatments over there. Okay? This row is the one that's closer to the sunlight coming from the window. Maybe that's affecting it. Okay, have one of each somehow, mixed in there. Okay? Experimental design. We had a whole course with it. We'll talk about that this evening. Any questions, any problems? Now, in the courses in statistics, and I don't know if you can see this, we may even just chat a little bit about the fact that there are 576 different configurations that will get you there. So part of what we do in class is we also dig a little bit into the math behind it. Right? It's not that because it works, it's also that because, okay, there is some math theory behind it. Sometimes it's a fun theory. Sometimes you get to like these things and you're like, oh, let me figure out how many they are. And I like to think that I do that in my classes. I have one or two students here, you can ask them. I try to keep the fun in there as well. So yeah, there is science here, there is math here, there's extra stuff that you can do. Abstract from what exactly you're doing and see what's happening in the background. But that's not my goal. I know we had that conversation. I try not to have people, get stuck in the computations. Right? Figure out what's the why you're doing this. Why is it? Okay. So let's do a faulty experiment to prove to you that things can be very skewed in terms of inference using you. Right, and we'll do this. All right, here's a question. Who knows what nematology is? Raise your hands, please. And I guess I should ask, who doesn't know what nematology is? Please raise your hands slowly. Okay, who doesn't know what nematology is? We'll go in once, twice. Fantastic. From a rough count, I can see that there are 3, 6, 9, 10, maybe another 10 over there, 20. I'll put another 10 here. 40 people. Okay? So according to this, we had knows nematology, 40 out of 40. Doesn't know nematology, 0 out of 40. Great. That tells me that all people know what nematology is. What's wrong with that sentence? All people know what nematology is.
We can say that this is not a representative group of all the people around the world.
Fantastic. 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 That's exactly it. The spoon is not representative of the pot. Think about how many times you've done that in your research without even knowing. Think about how many times you've done that in your research without even knowing. Trying to test something that either is already there, or you already know that it's not there. I already knew that all of you guys are going to say yes. Heck, I even know what nematology is. It's a Greek word, and it means talk about nematodes. Nematodes in Greek are like little things. It's either going to be like strings or viruses, so I figured it out. But not everybody knows what nematology is. So our experiment is faulty, right? If I am to test who knows nematology, I need to go out there, sit in the corner, outside the unit, for example, and ask people at random. Okay? Really do my job right. Or something like that. So, be careful every time you do your experiment that you're actually measuring things right where you're measuring them. If you're asking this question to plant pathology or entomology or whatever department, they probably know what's up. But if you ask it for the general population, they don't. Going back to you cannot do crazy inferences just by looking at a non-representative sample. Agreed? Yes? Fantastic. All right. So be careful on your samples. Another thing is, be careful, pay attention to the details. This is a published paper. This paper, and it's not published because it's true, it was published because we wanted to showcase that people don't pay attention to details, and it was done with the blessings of the Medical Journal Association, because they see a lot of crazy, stupid papers out there, and they wanted to put a stop to that. Parachute use to prevent death and major trauma when jumping from an aircraft. Randomized controlled trial. Gets worse. It is a randomized controlled trial. 92 aircraft passengers aged 18 and over were screened for participation. Out of those 92, we chose, not me, they chose 23 to actually perform this experiment. And those 23 were representative of the population. We had 50% women, 50% men. Most of the minorities were there. It was done right. Very right. That one? That was a trial. All 23 went through it. Main outcome. Did it? They looked at whether or not a person's going to die. They also had severity score of injury. Results. Parachute use not significantly reduced death or major injuries. 0% of parachute, 0% control. The p-value is greater than 0.9. The finding was consistent and accessible. So jumping off the plane or helicopter with the parachute or backpack, 0 deaths, no cases. The p-value was 0.95. We say that if your p-value is smaller than 0.05, then it's statistically significant. And we don't say the other way around. But come on, if you get 0.95 p-value, they're probably exactly the same. That's how I say it. Of course, everybody should be riding right now. Jumping off a plane with or without a parachute, no differences, randomized trial. Yeah, I didn't say that the plane was not on the ground. I mean, come on, could you expect people to jump off the plane and put them on the ground? So, in terms of experimental design, this was done perfectly. It was explained fantastically, the math was correct. Detail. That was the maximum height they jumped off. Now, we're laughing about this. Again, think about how many times this has occurred, actually. You're measuring something, but you're measuring something wrong. Or you're trying to prove something, and you're measuring something using the wrong premises, let's say. We're not doing this analysis if everybody's jumping from 1,000 feet, where it matters. We're doing it if they jump from 1 foot, where it doesn't matter, you're going to find the same result. Okay? So be careful of the details. Your experiment could be flawless and perfect in terms of math and statistics, but it could be garbage because it's measuring something that we don't care about. Careful about the details. Also, it is not research if you've already planned the outcome. And now I will be a little bit more pointy. A lot of times in my consulting career, people came to me and said, make the numbers work. Can we do something about it? What if I change tests? I get a smaller p-value. That's a big no-no, right? But it is far too easy, especially if you're eager to get these papers out, to just plan things in such a way so you get the right value at the end, the one that you have anticipated. You just can't change that p-value. P-value is what it is. You can't change the test to get it one that works. One does not simply adjust the p-value. It is what it is. So be careful with the details and try to be honest. Sometimes no result is a publishable result. Okay? I spent a lot of time in my 705 class talking about exactly that. The ethics behind this. Come on. We also have an obligation as scientists to present something that's correct, to present something that's going to help other scientists improve, send people to the moon again, or something like that. Okay. So that's another thing that I see a lot, and I have a feeling that you're going to stop doing that the moment that you take a bunch of stats classes. This will be drilled into your head. Yes, there are many techniques, but we're not shifting around to find the one that works for us. That's not how we do. We shift around to find the one that works with that problem. Okay? The p-value is not the target, the problem is. Right. Now, I've been talking about these courses over and over, and again, I'm just trying to connect this into the stats curriculum. I learned that you guys have to take the 705, that's the Statistical Techniques 1. Great course. I definitely recommend that. And the sequence after that is Statistical Techniques 2. Those two, if you get them, you get a good understanding of what stats is all about in a broad sense. Now, for this type of crowd, I would also offer that these three could be something you consider if you want a little bit extra. Especially the experimental design. For those of you that go out in the field and set up plots and whatnot, there's a lot of value there. I would strongly suggest getting that as soon as you can. Unfortunately, it has to follow the other two, so that's probably happens through your second years. Parallel to that, there's categorical data analysis, and I hear a lot of good things about that. It's probably because Dr. Marks is teaching it. Great guy. If you ever get to meet him, if you ever get to take a class with him, just take it. It's fantastic. But he's also a lot more into let's learn interpretation, let's learn big picture rather than get stuck with the stats. There used to be a course, Biological Population Statistics, offered exclusively to people like you. And guess what happened to that? It's gone. It's still in the books, but we haven't offered it for the past 40 years. Why? So don't get people that are interested in that. Why? Because people take the 705, the 715, and go like, I'm done with stats. I don't need to see any more of that. If the interest were to grow, these classes would pop up again. And these are targeting things like, how do you do processes in the lab? How do you literally set things up in the lab? I knew that there was a practicum offered with biological population statistics where you would go with your project and the professor will say, you're doing it right, you're not doing it right. We can't offer that anymore because nobody's taking this. Still, keep it in the back of your heads as something we can perhaps make flourish again in the future. Another thing is, I'm shamelessly advertising this course because it's mine, Digital Agriculture. From the discussion again that I had with a bunch of you, we need to move away from traditional statistics because the world is moving away from traditional statistics. And perhaps some of you want to try some of these new models, neural networks, support vector machines, and all that beautiful stuff, deep learning. I don't know. Everybody's abuzz with those things. Well, digital agriculture may give you an idea what they are. That's what I do over there. Just give everybody an idea what they are, and I teach them how to implement it, and maybe a little bit about the theory, but not too deep. And in that discussion that we had earlier on, those two will give you all the benefits that you will need to get your things published. This could be the future, though. 10 years down the road, it will go like this instead of like that. I'm just saying. That's my feeling. I've seen this happen in health. I don't see why agriculture is not going to fall. All right, now, 1 for sure, 2 probably. Why would you want to get a 3rd? Minor in statistics goes a long way. You just get 3 classes, the ones that I described, you just get a minor. Graduate student last semester, her PhD is in math. She's now working at a school, at a college, basically, teaching stats because she has a minor. So think of it as like, oh, this is an extra thing that I can do. I'm certified to be able to work with simple data. That opens up a lot of doors. Besides like being something that you have a fallback, you can then, when you get your PhD, by the way, PhD is just a license for you to learn. And my PhD is in algebraic topology. Math, and more math. What do I do now? Data analytics in agriculture. My PhD just enables me to learn new things and apply my techniques to something else. Anything that you learn just expands whatever you're going to be doing in the future. Math minor, stats minor, very helpful. Okay? So keep that in the back of your head. You get these 2 because you have to. Get 1 more, you get a minor. Not a bad deal, right? Okay. Now, here's what is involved in statistics. All right, statistics 1, the course that I'm teaching. Yeah, you start with numerical standards of data. We do a bunch of graphs and beautiful histograms and box plots and whatever. And I do not do those by hand. Whoever does that, like, you guys nuts? I have computers. You never compute the mean by hand. Come on, just plug your data in there. But then the question was, do you use SAS? Do you use R? Do you use data? It doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Those are just slaves and just put them there. Do your thing, computer. I don't care which one it is. We do use SAS now at the Experimental Statistics Department, but starting the spring of 2020, so a year from now, the 704 class is going to be taught in SAS, the 705 class is going to be taught in R. But unfortunately, don't quote me on that. Maybe the new head is going to come in and switch the curriculum all around. But that's the understanding that we have right now. And my 705 class offers labs both in SAS and in R. I have the notes available to the students. I say, you guys pick, I don't care. And that's how I want you to treat this. It's not the statistical package that does the trick. Having said that, I hear from a lot of you guys that you use R because it has this nice tool that already somebody has worked on and it helps you. Great. Bring that on. We'll help you with that as well. Probability, it's probably the one that you're not going to use. But again, it has a lot of math, so you should learn how to speak probability. So it looks greater. In your papers, inference is a big chunk of it. And again, I spent a lot of time on the theoretical part of inference rather than p-value is 0.05, therefore blah. Hypothesis testing, again, a lot of time on hypothesis testing. Analysis of variance. All right, I talk about analysis of variance in the class. I go through all the hoops, I show everything, tables and whatnot. Do I use them in practice? No, never. Do I ever do scientific work with ANOVA? No, never. Do I do consulting with ANOVA? No, never. I use some sort of linear model, glim mix, whatever. But it's still, I tell my consulting, oh, remember that class on ANOVA that you saw that table? It's exactly the same. You just change this and that. Okay. It's much easier for me to point to ANOVA that we did and it's easy to see in the class and change it a little bit rather than teach you glim mix on the spot or the R glim mix, which is impossible to decipher. So, yes, we teach the stats of the previous century, but we can use that as a template to step on and teach you whatever you want in the consulting. And I'll talk about that in a second. Finally, we end with regression. A lot of classes want regression, maybe not you, but this is our most favorite one. And that's basically the biggest part of statistics too. And perhaps this is not something useful for this class, but I would strongly suggest stick around for statistics 2 for the last part of it. Analysis of covariance helps a lot to weed out the true effects from the random effects. This variable explains that variable. My treatment actually works. Extra effects did not, explain a lot and so on. So you have to learn this language before you start applying it in your research. And on top of that, at the very end, we do experimental design. And last year, I know that there were some discussions of how to do treatment ranges because Dr. Wu had some students that had a specific question, and they went to her and she designed that. So if you keep us in the loop, if you go to these classes, if you say, okay, I have this concrete problem, we have ways to weave that in. We can show you experimental design, even in Stats Quant. You can create a good side thing. I do have a section on experimental design. It's just one paragraph. I could make it 3 if that helps. So what I'm trying to say is that the experimental statistics department is there to help. And you can get help through the classes, or you can get help through consulting. And how many of you have used consulting in the past? Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not that many, sadly. Just to give you a little bit of background from the experimental statistics department, when we started, the only mission was to basically do consulting. The Ag Center hired a bunch of, actually there was only one statistician, the rest was something else. They hired them and said, all right, sit in this corner, people are going to come to you and ask questions. You help them with that. That's the only thing you need to do. You don't need to teach, don't need to publish, just do consulting. So that was the main mission of the department for maybe 10 years. Then we kind of expanded and we added, now we only have a master's. At some point we had a PhD. Now we don't have a PhD. We're going to get a new one. It's a big mess. But the idea is, this is what we do for a living. Consulting. Every time any of you, as long as you're LSU affiliated, you have a statistical question. You're banging your head against the wall. How on earth do we do this? Instead of doing that, come to my office. We'll bang our heads into the wall together. Or I'll hold and you just bang it. Consulting works as follows. You fill in this form, and I have the link up there, which you will find in my presentation. Fill in this form, put a short description of the problem, and then you will be paired with one of the professors and a graduate student. You will come in for the consultation. We'll ask a bunch of questions. You will share the data with us. We'll give it back at the end. We're not doing anything with it. Unless it's interesting and then we get extra papers and we publish together. That has happened. But the main thing is we try to figure out the problems with you, explain whether or not you did it right, fix whatever we can fix, and so on and so forth. We don't need anything. No money. You don't have to put as co-authors. The moment that you fill this in, my job is done. That is like I take a brownie point, for example, every time I do consulting. I have to do a couple of them in a year. You help the graduate student too. Because a graduate student that sits with me and learns how to do this becomes then a professor in statistics and knows how to treat this in the future. If he or she gets a similar question, they know, oh yeah, how did we do it there? Experimental design, this is how you do it. So you help another fellow graduate student learn. They actually use the output we have a class called consulting. And they write a little write-up, and they say, this is my consulting principle, get a grade for it. So students over there get a grade, professors get a pat in the back, and you get a paper much faster. Use consulting, please. Why not? I did hear some complaints. We're trying to change, all right? We're going to be a little bit more on board with the consulting. I heard that sometimes you don't get cooperation, and I'll leave it as that. You'll get more cooperation starting next semester, and you can even pick whoever you want. So yeah, use consulting. And don't just use consulting anytime you want. It's much easier if you have this roadmap in the back of your head. When you start your thesis, the initial phase, right? I'm assuming you're taking some classes, right? Take 1 hour to do a consulting on that experimental design. You probably already sat down with your professor and said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Great, you have that write-up. Maybe you have orals, you have proposals, something like that, right? Grab that one, get a consulting with the stats department. Show it to the statistician, say, is this right? I'm going to get good results. Do I need to fix something? Okay. Fix it in the beginning. All right, then take take some stats classes. While you're doing your experiments, while you're taking your core classes, take also some stat classes. You will appreciate what you're doing over there. You will do your data collection better. You will be able to understand how to adjust, how to fix things. Oh, I'm not doing it right because today he said something about normality. Does that apply to my data? Let's go check. And then at the end, right before you defend, have another consult in which you check whether or not things work. And did you actually get what you set up to get? And if you do that, you also have a shield. Right? If somebody during your defense says, why did you use this method versus that method? You can just say, oh, that's what the consulting told me. I'll share the blame. Okay? Now, this might sound shallow, but if you put another person checking your results, then you're more sure that you did it right. Your advisors will only know what's up. They might miss a detail. Somebody else might be picking that detail up. The statistician will see if they're doing the job right. So we'll make sure that you didn't do something wrong because we're sharing that burden. We know that that student, if something is wrong, is going to go ahead and say, Dr. Thomas told me about it when I was in his consulting last week. So make sure that you're not doing something wrong. Think about that like that. Just shield. Also, I might pick up on something that your advisor just doesn't know. These guys are spending so much time learning their own science. They might be missing something in statistics. And I might just see it. I'm like, oh, yep, that's a simple one, fix it. Less rebuttal from those referees when you're trying to publish that thing. Okay. All right. Good roadmap. And I'm not saying take many stats classes, but take the first two if you can. Take the first one because you must. Take a second one to get a better idea of what's up here. All right, so that's more or less what I wanted to talk to you about the classes themselves. Now I want to talk a little bit about how your department can collaborate with the stats department through research and stuff. And I'm going to open it up first. I just got this past semester a 1-year graduate assistantship. I can sponsor a graduate student for a year, $35,000. This is tied to the rice research station. They gave me money to basically do research on rice. Guess how much I know about rice? I actually saw my first rice field last year. But the idea there is to get a collaboration going. Get a person that knows rice, either through plant pathology, breeding, and then I'll teach him or the rice. Okay? So if you know of anybody that would be interested in data-intensive analytics effort in rice breeding, send them my way. I can pay your salary for at least a year. If you're thinking about a backup plan, I heard a couple of folks thinking maybe I need to have a backup plan. This could be it. And of course, if you are thinking about such an opportunity on your end, but you're saying, oh, I wish I had a statistician or a mathematician or a computer scientist to cover the burden of all the analytics in the background, send me an email. I might be able to help. Take the class, Digital Agriculture. If you are really interested in seeing what's going to happen in 10 years, and the Ag Center is interested in that. For example, next Tuesday we have the Digital Ag Day. We're going to have it about 60 vendors in the area. We'll have 100 folks in there. They want to come and see how data analytics is affecting agriculture nowadays. These guys are thinking it's interesting, maybe we need to listen. And that, I was brought into this university to do exactly that. Figure out how data analytics is going to shape the future of agriculture in any aspect in the next 10 years. And I'm offering a course that basically teases all the cool stuff that you can do. I also say, at least for the first couple of years, if you don't have the credits to take it, that's fine. Come and tell me, I want to just sit in. Can I sit in? Yes. I know it's against LSU policy, and I know that I'm going to take right now, but I don't care. I'm trying to get these ideas out. If you want to just sit in, only to hear about drones, fine. Come in, sit in, doesn't matter. I'll teach you about drones whenever I know. Okay. And as I said, the Digital Ag Day, this is going to be a thing going in the future. I mean, we had a whole seminar in the conference that we had back in the fall, December, whatever, on digital ag. If you're working, and this goes for the professors mostly, if you're working with extension agents, there's going to be a program starting this summer about educating these folks how to talk intelligently, at least for all these things. So if you're interested, again, talk to me about it. I can put you in contact with whoever needs to be contacted, all right? Why? Because, okay, as we're moving forward, you'll see a lot more hires that can do this as well. So we need to connect with these folks. All right. Then Ed told me, like, give us some resources, a couple of stuff that you could be reading, and especially for the graduate students, and be okay with stats. That's not an easy thing to do, but I was thinking, at least you should know about these books. The Practical Statistics and Experimental Design for Plant and Crop Science. This is a very concise little book. Has a lot of these examples. If you want to do that many treatments in this and you're using pots and whatever, do it like this. It's got a lot of colorful pictures. It's very, very straightforward. The book that I'm teaching stats with is called Statistical Methods. It's free in the library, and it's relatively inexpensive. It's around the $60 range if you just want to buy hardcover. And that has a lot of details. The Open Intro to Statistics is an open version of this. It's just gearing towards undergraduate, but it gets the job done. Now, before I move to the end and open up for questions, I will need to say this in terms of tools, in terms of statistical programs. It doesn't matter, but in our consulting, we primarily use sets. I'm going to fight that, and I promise you, within a couple of years, we'll be able to answer questions in R. Because I know that a lot of you guys are going to be using some cool packages. Heck, I want to learn those cool packages too. So, at some point in the future, we should be able to answer questions in R as well. How does that thing work? Okay. In the meantime, if you got an R question, send it my way. Unofficially, if you'd like. And I'll give it my best. All right? But I intentionally don't put any resources for SAS or Stata up there. Try to have your research independent of the program. Okay? Good? All right. Hope I didn't bore you to death. That's it, and I'll open it up for questions.
Got a question? Raise your hand.
It's not nematology. Stats.
All right, so I have to start every time. What about the p-value controversy that I read about? You know, there are some fields that want to bury p-value because you can play two names.
All right, so the p-value hacking, the
P-hacking, yeah.
Here's how I answer it to my students. The p-value is something that is related to your field. So it's not a problem of statistics, it's a problem of your field. Some fields are very relaxed about that p-value, especially, let's say, humanities. P-value of 0.1 in humanities will get you published. A p-value in engineering has to be close to 0.001. So, and that's happening in consulting, right? Somebody gets a p-value of 0.58 and says, is that good enough? It's not exactly 0.5. Can I just still say it's good enough? And my answer is, what does your field say? In nematology, you probably have bibliography, right? I'm pretty sure you guys publish stuff. At some point, a certain value gets established. That value is because basically that's the variability that you notice in plant pathology. If that variability is up to 0.1, then that's your p-value. I did mention at some point that you can switch tests and push the p-value up or down. Yeah, that happens. That's p-hack. That happens. I try in my class to stress how awful that is in terms of, like, it's not just cheating the viewers of your paper, you're cheating yourself. You're not a scientist then. And I say that out loud. You're not a scientist if you do that. What is a scientist, right? We're trying to create something new, progress humankind, right? If you're lying your way through it, you're not a scientist. That's it. But that's the best you can do. Now, whether or not it's useful, it is very useful. The p-value as a concept, the inference as a concept, statistical tools are very useful.
So basically what you're saying is let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct.
Let's say the way the psychologists do.
Absolutely. And we're bashing on psychologists because that's something that pops up left and right. And that's something that pops up left and right because in psychology, first of all, the p-values can go up to 0.15. Human beings are much more variable than plants. So they had to push their p-values up to get meaningful results. Again. But again, we also see a lot of, this technique works better than that technique because now the p-value is 0.99 instead of 0.15. I'll use that one. That goes again back to you can't really adjust the p-value. Instead, justify why you use that test. Perhaps using that test was the right thing to do in the beginning. But if you do that at the end, then you're p-hacking. If you have established a test in the beginning and your p-value is 0.58 and you still have a gut feeling that this is significant, then you can say so. You can say that I scored very close to this. You can blame things I didn't have enough data. You can say things like variables outside affected it. You still get published without lying. Got it? So that's the idea. I still use the tool. I still say everything right. I still get published. That's the good way of approaching this. The moment that you switch the tool in order to get the right p-value that's slightly under 0.5 and say, haha, I got it. Very, very unethical. It's unethical. I don't know how else to describe it. And these talks, these conversations, I have them in my class. I do have them in my class. And those are the kinds of things that you pick up by attending those classes. Yeah, I also show you the formula that will give you the p-value, but I also spend a lot of time in the explanation at the end. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So why the adherence to SAS over R, which is
It actually goes back 30 years. Some of the hires back then were all SAS experts, so it kind of, you use the notes that the previous guy gave you. I mean, let's be honest. That's one, and the second thing is, okay, if you want to do simple stuff, like all the stuff that we teach in 705, 715, SAS just does it. There's a proc uni something, and it just does the thing. Yeah. In R, it's coding, right? All sorts of crazy things can go wrong with coding. Error messages are a little bit harder to decipher in R, and there's so many packages, so people go like, which one's the right one? Whereas in a software like SAS, you learn a bunch of procedures, it's the same thing over and over again. As long as your data is tame, that's what you do. So it's easier to teach for sure. And it's also used to be the default for, let's say, the top 500 companies. They would just use SAS. So field of biology would just use SAS. So since you were trying to prepare your student for that, you said, yeah, SAS is default. Now this has changed, actually. Any data analytics endeavor will have to have R involved.
I thought the main reason we use open source is the fact that anyone can change the code and fix whatever's wrong with it.
That's true. And so due to these things, now people are moving to open source as well. The community for R is literally 2 orders of magnitude more than the community of SAS. So there are a lot more people fixing problems in R than they are in SAS, because one of them is proprietary, the other one is free. There are a lot more people creating new things in R than they are in SAS.
Related to his question,
Yeah.
his comment about fixing open source, like as a novice that's not an expert in statistics, how do you know that there's a problem in your R code or in the language that you need to change it in the first place? That's why I like using SAS.
Right. That's yet another reason why people use SAS, because it's tried and tested and just does one thing. The easy answer to that is get a consulting up, send us our code, we'll check it. Or, as some folks sitting in this room do, send us just the data and say, Thanos, fix this code. And then Thanos wakes up at 4 a.m. in the morning, changes the baby, and then types a little bit of code. Right, Brian? Yep. So, you always have that problem. In R, and in any language, right? If you're writing code, there might be a bug. I'm not saying that a statistician can find the bug, but I'm saying a person that has worked with R a lot can find the bug. There's another subtle question that I don't know if you asked that one. How confident you are about the R package that it's doing the SAS thing right. Or, sorry, that it's doing the stats things right. That is more subtle. And you can be more sure that the SAS package is doing it right rather than the R package. But still, mainstream R packages are doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay, time's about up. One thing I'll say before we